Chapter 1066, Sword Energy Like an Endless Sea. War was the most cruel act committed by humans. It took away the lives of people at the fastest rate. The Weiwu army did not allow Lu Shu to fight by himself. No matter how strong and fast Lu Shu was at killing, it was insignificant in comparison to the entire war. The Black Feather army was solemn, while the red tassel on the heads of the Weiwu army soldiers were like blood. In the clash between red and black, there was a constant flow of new strength from the Black Feather army, but the Weiwu army did not back down. Suddenly, the former leader of the Black Feather army, Li Liang, said to Lu Shu, "The Black Feather army formation has started to contract. They are trying to minimize their injuries. I think that about 80% of them are about to launch a converging attack on us from behind. Even if they cannot defeat us, they want to use the lives of people to delay us here." Lu Shu was dumbfounded. He had thought that the Black Feather army was on the verge of defeat. Yet, they had a strategy against him? Needless to say, the Black Feather army had a staunch willpower that was only second to the heavenly network. Li Liang spoke with confidence. Lu Shu nodded his head. "Tell the brothers behind to be careful." Lu Shu had knowledge of himself. Other than the fact that he was not willing to admit the constant failure of his plans, he would never play with the lives of others. Li Liang was the former leader of the Black Feather army. He understood the Black Feather army the best. But at the next moment, Lu Shu and the rest saw a group of Black Feather army soldiers on the horizon. This time, they were on horses. The moment they appeared in their field of view, they started to charge towards the Weiwu army. The horses were very normal. Earlier, when Lu Shu saw Duanmu Huangqi's blazing cloud foals, he had asked Yi Qian about them. The people of the West region specialized in nurturing horses. The horses they nurtured were strong and very fast. Although their strength was a far cry from that of the Weiwu army, if they charged towards the Weiwu army, their inertia would be able to badly damage the Weiwu army formation. They might even be able to kill some Weiwu army soldiers. It was said that specialized work should be left to the specialists. Lu Shu felt that it had been worth it to save Li Liang. He could even consider allowing Li Liang to take over commanding the Weiwu army. After all, Lu Shu was not good at commanding. Zhang Weiyu could not stand the effects of his comrades being killed. Thus, Li Liang was the most suitable person for the job. It was impossible for there to be no deaths on the battlefield. Even if the Imperial Dragon soldiers participated, there would definitely be injuries as well. Zhang Weiyu had wanted to retreat. Lu Shu did not plan on forcing him to participate. On the contrary, he was planning to help him. Just like what he had done for Lu Yizhao, he felt that it was best for everyone to be able to do what they wanted to do most. Not everyone was born to fight. This time, Lu Shu was not rash. Instead, he thought about it. He asked Lu Xiaoyu to summon Anthony. On one hand, if they were to fight with masters later on, the battlefield would be in the sky. Anthony would be at a disadvantage. Rather than preserving his strength, it would be better to attack now. On the other hand, when Li Liang faced horsemen like this, they would typically sacrifice some people to alleviate the impact from the horsemen. But this was what he had done in the Black Feather army. Most commanders would give out cannon fodders when they had no choice. This was the meaning of the cannon fodders. But the Weiwu army was different. No one in the army would become a cannon fodder. If they were to survive, they would survive together. If they were to die, they would die together. When the horsemen approached them, a wave of dirt suddenly surged from the ground. The wave stretched over a few kilometers. It was like a portion of the Great Wall of China. While the wave surged, Anthony raised its height, turning it into a tsunami. The wave of dirt charged towards the Black Feather army, engulfing them in an instant. It was complete chaos. Dust flew everywhere. Those on horses were able to break through the storm, but when they approached the Weiwu army, they were no longer a threat. Anthony had exhausted all his energy with this move and returned to the black hole to rest. The Weiwu army knew that this was Lu Xiaoyu's method. Suddenly, Zhang Weiyu felt that he knew where Lu Shu and Lu Xiaoyu's confidence in facing Duanmu Huangqi had come from. He could sense that the wave of dirt was only one of Lu Xiaoyu's many methods. Furthermore, Lu Shu had been preserving his strength from the very beginning. In reality, Lu Shu had not been preserving his strength. He had just been using money to purchase more skills. If he did not use these magical swords, he would have to use his other skills. Lu Shu loved money, but he could put it aside as well. At that moment, there were waves of energy in the distance. The waves of energy were released in pulses. It was as if a space was undergoing a transition, and the world was changing. Duanmu Huangqi and 3 other masters were in that direction. But all of these were not important. What was important was that his comrades and the way home were there. Lu Shu remained calm. But suddenly, he headed towards that direction. Follow me. I want to go home today. Let's see who dares to stop me. The soldiers of the Black Feather Army suddenly realized that Lu Shu seemed to have gone crazy. So the Lu Shu earlier was just the tip of the iceberg. The swords turned into dust in his hands. The swords in his hands were constantly replaced, but Lu Shu was very calm. There were times when Lu Shu felt that this world was very strange. The concentration of magical energy had increased. The old era was over. They were living in a new era. Lu Shu had never thought that he would risk his life for anyone. Lu Shu felt that his life was his. What was more valuable than his own life? But when that person who loved black bean sauce noodles was facing death, he probably did not regret anything. Lu Shu would not regret anything either. Lu Shu suddenly felt that the swords were too slow. Too slow. Too slow. Too slow. The Black Feather Army suddenly saw Lu Shu stop. Even the swords in his hands stopped appearing. It was as if he had used up all his swords. Lu Shu looked at the crowd of Black Feather Army. His calmness was unprecedented. He suddenly felt that he was very close to the way home. At this moment, he remembered why that person wanted to eat black bean sauce noodles when he was about to die. It was the taste of home. When the Black Feather Army was rejoicing over the fact that Lu Shu had used up his swords, he suddenly saw thousands of swords above their heads. The sword energy was like an endless, raging sea. There was the sound of thunder above the sea. It was ear-piercing. Lu Shu laughed. Everyone who is under the swords today can take revenge on me in the future. I am Lu Shu. I am the 9th Heavenly King in the Heavenly Network, Lu Shu. Lu Xiaoyu, who was still resting underground, had taken back the exhausted Johnson. She calmly said, "They have no future." Chapter 1067 Enemy Attack. The Rain of Swords. This was an attack that everyone had heard of but not seen before. It was said that in the palace, the swords that Lu Shu had used covered the sky, instantly killing 1,000 underlings and 10 patrons. Now, the Black Feather Army was beneath, but they were still facing Lu Shu. Lu Yizhao calmly watched this scene. The era where everyone below is a lackey of the king has finally arrived. Zhang Weiyu fell silent. No one knew what he was thinking about. The next moment, the rain of swords fell like shooting stars. Even the stars were not as bright as the swords. Li Haitan muttered, "The 9th Heavenly King? Who are the previous 8? Are they even stronger than the Great Lord?" The fortress at Luo City had been completed. The construction workers had given up on rest. Everyone was racing against time. They were very clear that every moment they saved while building the fortress would give their comrades in the Heavenly Network more time. Chen Zuan and Cheng Qiuqiao led the flood of bronze and stood on the city wall. Everyone in the fortress were nervously preparing for war. The fortress was vast and lofty. It was as if a hill had landed in Luo City, covering the entire region from Luo City to Longmen Mountain. The civilians had all evacuated. They were at the Baimang Mountains, waiting for the train to bring them away. The secret practitioners were in charge of maintaining order, as well as the arrangements for their journey. Every time a train arrived, they would send civilians on the train according to the name list away from this dangerous land. None of the secret practitioners ran away. No one complained either. If they were tired, they would lie on the ground and sleep. They would continue to work when they woke up. Times of great danger tested civilizations. These civilizations might go astray during times of peace, but never disappointed when there was danger, as someone would always step up. The grains had all been transported. The Heavenly Network knew that this would be a long battle. The opening of the space pathway had become more frequent. From the aggression of the Black Feather Army, the Heavenly Network would have to face a long battle. Thus, they had to prepare enough rations. The fortress had to be strong enough as well. If the Black Feather Army broke through the fortress, all the soldiers in the fortress would perish. Luo City was the first barrier in blocking the Black Feather Army. It was also their final defense. The Black Feather Army was much stronger than the Heavenly Network. The Heavenly Network had no choice but to gather all their practitioners for this battle. Not only were the civilians in Luo City evacuating, even the civilians in Yuzhou had run to their relatives' houses far away. Some said that they would have been fine without the magically rich era. The earth had been peaceful for a long time before the magically rich era. But did they have a choice? No. Chen Zuan was melancholic. When will Brother Shu return? We might not be able to defeat them. Why isn't he back? Brother Shu would have his own plans. All we have to do is take care of our own affairs, said Cheng Qiuqiao calmly. Don't think that you can change the topic about my car. Tell me. What are you going to do about it? Chen Zuan was speechless. Cheng Qiuqiao's car had not been repaired. Over 2 months had passed. But it was not that Chen Zuan did not want to repair it. There was no one to repair it. They had overlooked one point. After the Black Feather Army had attacked, all the civilians in the city had escaped, including the insurance staff and the repairmen in the city. How were they supposed to repair the car without a repairman? They could only leave it as it was. There were construction workers who could repair cars, but they were very nervous over building the fortress. Many of them did not sleep for days in order to complete their work. They had to ensure that their work quality met the minimum standards as well. Under these circumstances, how could Chen Zuan and Cheng Qiuqiao trouble someone to repair the car for them? Qiuqiao, look at how many people there are in the fortress. Even the quantity of food has decreased. No one knows when the Black Feather Army will come. Shouldn't we focus on the national economy and the livelihood of the people? How can you worry about your own problems during times like this, said Chen Zuan with stern righteousness. Recently, the number of people in the fortress had increased significantly. As a result, the serving portion in the fortress had decreased. It was not that the cooks were not doing their jobs well. They just had too many meals to make. Occasionally, people who had never cooked before joined them in their jobs. But everyone knew the reason behind this. They would not complain. Ha! Ha! Cheng Qiuqiao calmly smiled. And? Look at it this way. Chen Zuan lowered his voice. I will help you improve your rations, and you will forget about your car for now. Is it a deal? Cheng Qiuqiao was dumbfounded. How will you improve my rations? Chen Zuan took out 2 large eggs from his invisible storage equipment. It was difficult for me to find these. Chen Zuan had received the acknowledgement of his family. Although his financial situation did not improve, the Chen family had given him their invisible storage equipment that they had treasured for a long time. There was only one set in the entire Chen family. Chen Bailey had found his space ring himself. The eggs were 2 times the size of a chicken egg. He asked, "What are those?" "Peacock eggs," said Chen Zuan in a small voice. "Since there was no one in the zoo, I went to take some. I heard that they are very fragrant." Chang Qiuqiao's expression darkened. "How could you steal their eggs?" "Peacocks are protected by the government." Chen Zuan did not expect Chang Qiuqiao to oppose him like this. He was slightly scared. The peacock said that it did not want the eggs. Chang Qiuqiao was speechless. Did it make sense for a peacock to say so? "You'd better return it." "Did you hear me?" Chang Qiuqiao was upset. Chen Zuan muttered, "Why do we have to care about whether they are protected in this age? We need people to protect us, let alone these animals." But at that moment, they suddenly felt a massive wave of energy exploding in front of them. This feeling was familiar. The waves were so large that one would be able to sense them, even if they were not a sensory type. Suddenly, Chen Zuan saw an invisible door appear half a kilometer away from the fortress. Then, a black wave poured in. They were ready to kill. It was the Black Feather Army. After 2 months, the Black Feather Army had come to attack the earth once again. Chen Zuan sensed his blood boiling. He turned and roared, "Enemy attack!" Everyone was growing. Lu Shu, Lu Xiaoyu, Chang Qiuqiao, and Chen Zuan were all growing. These immature young people would eventually become the cornerstones of defense. The next moment, Chen Zuan pulled down his helmet. He stood on the city wall, waiting for the arrival of the Black Feather Army. The Longmen Fortress was the Heavenly Network's first line of defense against the Black Feather Army. Then Chen Zuan was willing to become the second line of defense. This would be a life-and-death battle. There was no turning back. Chapter 1068 Magical Weapon That Controls the Skies. When Chen Zuan's voice echoed through the fortress, the Heavenly Network was like a precise weapon. Every single gear in the weapon interlocked with one another without error. There were no spare parts or any missing pieces. When every member of the Heavenly Network went into their positions, their footsteps would become synchronized. This was the power of a team. In the past, people would marvel at how the Black Feather Army had high combat discipline. Everyone agreed. Although they were the enemy, there was no doubt that the Black Feather Army had given in to the Wei Wu Army very few times. Even if they were overwhelmed, they would find various methods to overcome their problems. The Black Feather Army was not united, but they could work together to achieve their common goal of victory. Lu Shu acknowledged that the Black Feather Army was not normal, as he had seen stronger cooperation in the Heavenly Network than in the Black Feather Army. At this moment, before the Black Feather Army could arrive at the city, the flood of bronze had gathered on the city wall, waiting for the war to begin. The fortress was only 500 meters away from the space pathway. A practitioner would be able to travel such a distance in less than 20 seconds. In the battle of time and order, the Heavenly Network had won. But this was a small detail in the war. It did not have much effect on the direction the war would progress towards. The next moment, even before the Black Feather Army had reached the city wall, they suddenly went into formation. 3 people formed a small team. The 2 people in front suddenly bent down and formed a bridge with their arms. The third person would step on the bridge. When he bent his body, the 2 people forming the bridge would shout, launching the third person into the air. The third person also exerted strength when he stepped on his comrade's arms. This massive force sent him up on the wall of the Longmen Fortress. The Longmen Fortress was very high. One would not be able to imagine jumping over the wall without the strength of a rank 2. It was not convenient for the Black Feather Army to bring massive weapons used to destroy cities to Earth, but this did not mean that they did not have a way to do so. Countless teams carried out this procedure. It was as if the leader of the Black Feather Army had prepared everything. This time, they were determined to win. Many soldiers from the Black Feather Army flew onto the wall like arrows being shot. When the soldiers of the Black Feather Army flew towards the wall, Chen Xuan laughed coldly. Suddenly, he jumped into the air and attacked the people who were landing. The soldiers from the Black Feather Army were not weak either. It was hard for them to hide their wild expressions beneath their helmets. One of the soldiers drew his padao and held it in his hands. He prepared to strike Chen Xuan's head. But the moment he was overhead of Chen Xuan had attacked him. Die. The soldier felt as if he had slammed into the wall. The massive force spread throughout his limbs and body. The soldier felt as if a thunderbolt was going through his body. Then, there was a cracking sound. All his bones had started to crack. He came down like lightning, but landed on the ground like a broken sack. He had died even before he reached the ground. Chen Xuan used the recoil from this attack to return to the city wall. The flood of bronze shouted as they killed the enemy, amazing. The others could not kill their opponents with such ease, but they stood their ground on the fortress and prevented any Black Feather Army soldiers from landing on the wall. Chen Xuan calmly raised his hand, as if he had received an award on stage. That wasn't much. He could not even stand less than half of my strength. The members of the Heavenly Network knew that this battle would not be easy. Many people knew that the Heavenly Network would not be able to defeat the Black Feather Army in terms of strength. Their average ability did not match that of the Black Feather Army. The Black Feather Army had much more manpower than the Heavenly Network as well. Even the top powers in the Heavenly Network were no match for that of the Black Feather Army. This was a conflict with a huge difference in strength. Many people went up the wall, knowing that they were going to die. They were about to face swords and blood. Many people saw Zhong Yutong growing white hair over the past 2 months. His eyes were bloodshot, but every day, when he saw his comrades from the Heavenly Network, he would smile and say that they would definitely win. Everyone knew that Zhong Yutong was forcing this. Everyone knew that he was utterly exhausted from handling the affairs of the Heavenly Network as the chief manager of Yuzhou. But he still showed his best side to his comrades. He did not affect their morale. Everyone knew that in theory, they would definitely lose this battle. But so what? If the outcome had been decided, then they would welcome it with a smile. They were willing to wait for their deaths. There was no one in the Heavenly Network who lived without a purpose. There were none in the past, and none in the future. At that moment, the Black Feather Army saw that they could not break through with their ordinary soldiers. 2 rank 1 patrons flew over, approaching the wall at high speeds. Everyone looked at Chang Qiuqiao expectantly. Chang Qiuqiao was speechless. Chen Xuan urged him. Don't hesitate. Do it. Qiuqiao, we're counting on you. Kill them, Qiuqiao. The little conch shell has reappeared among the humans. Chang Qiuqiao, who controls the skies? Chang Qiuqiao's expression darkened. He looked at the 2 rank 1 patrons. The little conch shell goes DDD. The moment he started to sing, the 2 patrons felt a strange force. It was as if the force had cut off their resonance with the heaven and the earth, affecting their ability to fly. They started to fall. Chang Qiuqiao was now a peak rank 2. Although Chen Xuan had advanced to rank 1 out of his sadness and anger, Chang Qiuqiao did not advance. But his ability was very strange. It could affect 2 rank 1s. The entire flood of bronze watched as the 2 rank 1 patrons fell from the sky. Suddenly, they cheered in unison. Qiuqiao is invincible. A tense battlefield was suddenly filled with cheers and laughter. Everyone knew that the enemy had only temporarily lost their ability to fly. They also knew that Chang Qiuqiao could only affect 2 rank 1s at one time, but this did not ruin their optimistic spirits. Chen Xuan laughed wildly. Qiuqiao, your ability is a magical weapon. Ha! 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 Just as Chen Xuan was laughing wildly, all the members of the Flood of Bronze saw 10 rank 1 patrons flying over from the Black Feather Army. Chapter 1069 A Reunion GIF. 2 months ago, everyone had joked with Cheng Qiuqiao that he had to advance to rank 1 as quickly as possible. If he was able to advance to rank 1, no one would be able to fly into the sky. The heavenly network would then have control over the airspace. No one would be able to oppose them. Furthermore, not only was he able to control the air, he was able to make his opponents laugh as well. Back then, Cheng Qiuqiao was so angry that he did not speak to them for half a month. He sang what he had to sing, but he had the right to be angry as well. But Cheng Qiuqiao had not been able to advance to rank 1. Thus, his ability was limited to only 2 people. Now, 12 rank 1 patrons had suddenly entered the battlefield. Even if the Flood of Bronze had thought that this battle would be difficult, they did not expect it to be this difficult. How many Class A's did the entire heavenly network have? Nie Ting and Shi Xuejin had not appeared, but no one was surprised. The Flood of Bronze knew that their battle would be even more difficult, as the enemy had 3 Shinsong Jings, as well as a Lord of Heaven. Chen Zuan sighed. It would be great if Brother Shu and Xiaoyu were here. His face was covered by his helmet, but Cheng Qiuqiao could feel a sense of desolation from his voice. He looked at Chen Zuan. Before he could speak, Chen Zuan laughed. If they were around, they would be able to see how ferocious I can be. To Chen Zuan, Lu Shu was a very special existence. In the past, he had constantly thought about how to obtain the acknowledgement of his family. But when he returned home for the new year, he realized that this desire had suddenly disappeared. He felt that the praises from his family were dull and meaningless. The flattery from his brothers and sisters did not motivate him. The luxury cars and houses that everyone talked about were no longer his focus. The entire New Year's ceremony was like a celebration that was not meant for him. Chen Zuan felt very lonely. He felt this loneliness when he looked at the crowd and realized that no one could embark on the same path as him. Thus, he had returned to Luo City early. Thankfully, Cheng Qiuqiao had returned early as well. Did Chen Zuan not need the acknowledgement of others? No. It was just that what he was pursuing had changed. At that moment, Chen Zuan felt that he was a comrade who had distanced himself from lowly hobbies. He realized that he wanted Lu Shu to turn back and see how Chen Zuan had grown more decent. He wanted Lu Shu to see how he had earned the respect of his comrades. To him, Lu Shu was a friend and a teacher. Lu Shu was his model example. All his growth had been because of Lu Shu's influence. Thus, after he grew, he wanted to tell Lu Shu that he was the same. He was going to catch up to Lu Shu. Then, if Lu Shu was able to give you a look of approval, you would be very happy. You would be purely happy. But Lu Shu had not returned. Chen Zuan felt slightly lonely, as he might not be able to catch the moment when he returned. Cheng Qiuqiao hurriedly said, "It's not the end yet. Don't do anything foolish." Chen Zuan turned and looked at the rank 1 patrons in the sky. He laughed. "We can't let them force Principal Nie and Mama Shi to attack. Their Shinsong Jing experts are waiting somewhere to deal the fatal blow. How can we allow them to have their own way?" Chen Zuan knew that the victory of this battle would not depend on them. It would be up to the Shinsong Jing experts. Nie Ting and Shi Xuejin had not attacked, as the Shinsong Jing experts from the enemy army had not attacked. Shinsong Jing had the ability to appear and disappear mysteriously. It was highly likely that whoever attacked first would lose. Thus, they had to hold back. It was not that they were cold-blooded and were willing to watch the Flood of Bronze die. They could not be headstrong in a battle concerning life and death. Everyone had a role to play. They would sacrifice themselves for the final victory. Thus, Chen Zuan knew that it was time for the Class A's to step out. They had to use their blood to create the best opportunity for Nie Ting and Shi Xuejin to attack. That opportunity might be fleeting, but Chen Zuan believed that Nie Ting and Shi Xuejin would not let them down. Chen Xuan said in a small, muffled voice, I will not seek for death. Your car has not been repaired. I have not become a heavenly king. I, Chen Xuan, will wait for the return of Brother Shu. Chen Xuan turned and laughed at the Black Feather Army. I am Chen Xuan from the Heavenly Network. Who dares to challenge me? Read more chapter on VIPnovel.com. At that moment, Chen Bailey, Li Yixiao, Nailin Ke, and Chen Xuan flew into the sky at the same time. They headed towards the 10 rank 1 patrons. At the same time, the 2 rank 1 patrons on the ground got up. The effects of Cheng Qiuqiao's abilities had worn off. Thus, they had regained their ability to fly. It was 4 against 12. Li Yixiao, Chen Xuan, and the rest were fearless. At that moment, Nie Ting and Shi Xuejin were at the Longmen Fortress. They were commanding the troops. Beside them was Chen Yuxuan, a master from the West region who was on the verge of death. Nie Ting was in no hurry to kill him. He allowed him to hold on to the last bit of life. Shi Xuejin asked curiously, just kill him. Even if you allow him to live, he will not give us any useful information. Nie Ting shook his head. No. We can't kill him yet. Shi Xuejin was dumbfounded. I am very curious. Is there any use in keeping him alive? Nie Ting thought about it and said, I'm not sure if Xiaoyu is able to capture the spirit of a Shinsong Jing. If she is able to do so, we can pass this person to her when we meet her again. She will definitely be very happy. When the members of the Heavenly Network in the fortress, who were making plans, heard this, they gasped in shock. Heavenly King Nie would present a Shinsong Jing expert to Lu Xiaoyu when they met again. It was only because he felt that Lu Xiaoyu would be able to capture the spirit of a Shinsong Jing. There were very few people in this world with such valiant personalities. Shi Xuejin calmly said, do you think that we will still have the chance to meet them? What if they cannot return? You know how dangerous it is now. That won't happen. Nie Ting shook his head. As long as Lu Shu knows about this war, he will definitely come back. We might even see him today. Shi Xuejin smiled. You really trust him. My insight is never wrong, said Nie Ting with confidence. Amidst the hustle of gathering information and counting the number of fatalities and injuries in the Heavenly Network, Yu Mingyu suddenly stopped. They felt an unprecedented confidence in Nie Ting's words. For some reason, Hao Jichao, who had always been following Nie Ting, suddenly felt that convincing Lu Shu to join the Heavenly Network had given Nie Ting the greatest sense of achievement. He did not even have this sense of achievement when he advanced to Shinsong Jing. Chapter 1070 I am Chen Xuan from the Heavenly Network. Who dares to challenge me? The command post was very busy. Nie Ting looked at Chen Yuxuan, who was on the ground. Chen Yuxuan's face was full of black veins. His foundation had been destroyed. But Nie Ting was not worried that the destruction of his foundation would affect Lu Xiaoyu's ability to capture spirits. After all, Lu Shu could use fruits to recover Chen Yuxuan's foundation before taking his spirit away. Nie Ting looked up at Shi Xuejin. Xiaoyu will be very happy. I feel that Chen Yuxuan's sword skills are not bad, although I am much better. Shi Xuejin was speechless. He looked at Nie Ting. Do you really have to praise yourself during a time like this? Shi Xuejin knew that if Nie Ting said that your sword skills were not bad, you were very powerful, as Nie Ting had absolute confidence in his swordplay. Suddenly, Nie Ting stood up and smiled. It's time for us to step in. Shi Xuejin calmly said, their 3 Shinsong Jings have not attacked. Nie Ting smiled. But we can't take the lives of our comrades to secure victory. The Heavenly Network has never done so. If not, how are we different from the Black Feather Army? I have never done such a thing. The sword in my hand is to protect them. Shi Xuejin smiled and stood up. Then let's go and meet that master from the West region. In a flash, they walked into a void. It was as if the space in front of them had broken. The next moment, Nie Ting suddenly appeared and attacked the rank 1 patrons surrounding Chen Zuan, Li Yixiao, and the rest. Shi Xuejin was in midair, with his hands behind him. He was behind Nie Ting, protecting him from any danger that might appear. Nie Ting's attack severely injured 3 of the rank 1 patrons. His massive sword let out a thunderous sound, like the blazing sun in the sky. Suddenly, 2 middle-aged men dressed in black robes appeared out of thin air. He tried to attack Nie Ting, but Shi Xuejin was prepared. With a wave of his sleeve, a ray of light suddenly appeared, stopping the 2 West Region masters. Nie Ting turned and stood beside Shi Xuejin. Good timing. Nie Ting had dared to attack, not because he did not want Chen Zuan and the rest to die, but because he had absolute confidence in Shi Xuejin. Shi Xuejin had been confused for decades. He sat in the courtyard and learned the morals of the world. When others had reached Class F, he was an ordinary person. When others had reached Class B, he was an ordinary person. He was still an ordinary person when others had reached Class A. This path was lonely, so lonely that Shi Xuejin had doubted himself. But one day, he finally understood. The dust covering the pearl had disappeared. He now had a pearl that could light up the mountains and rivers. Nie Ting did not rush in delivering another attack. He gathered his swords in his black cloak, that looked like a flag in the air. Come out. Isn't it embarrassing for a Lord of Heaven to hide like this? Your opponent is here, said Nie Ting. Duanmu Huangqi slowly revealed himself. The black ceremonial dress that he wore was very similar to that of Wen Zaifu's. It was adorned with 12 symbols: dragon, sun, moon, stars, mountains, pheasant, wine vessel, algae, fire, rice grains, axe, and a pattern. Not everyone could wear this ceremonial dress. It could only be given by the king of gods. Duanmu Huangqi's appearance was that of a middle-aged man, but his slanting eyes on his thin face made him look extremely somber. He smiled insidiously. So the land of forefathers has experts like you as well. I am Duanmu Huangqi, the hero that looks down on the world. Heroes respect heroes. Why don't you follow me? I will bring you to see the world outside. Nie Ting shook his head. You have said something wrong. Oh. Duanmu Huangqi was calm. He looked as if he wanted to hear more. Nie Ting smiled. You are not a hero. Duanmu Huangqi laughed coldly. Watch and learn. Nie Ting and Shi Xuejin had worked together to close in on the 3 masters. Nie Ting knew that no matter how strong he and Shi Xuejin were, it would still be very difficult for them to face 3 masters who had worked together. They were rare geniuses, but they also needed time to settle. But so what? They would win this battle, even if it meant death. For a period of time, Shi Xuejin and Nie Ting went all out. The pearl that Shi Xuejin held helped Nie Ting to avoid any ambushes. On the other hand, Nie Ting delivered one blow after another. They were using all they had to ensure that Duanmu Huangqi and the rest retreated. They did not spare any energy or spirit qi to ensure that Duanmu Huangqi left the battlefield. They had to prevent the heavenly network from being injured. The masters went further and further away as they fought. They were the ones who would determine the outcome of this war, but this did not mean that the people on the battlefield could wait for them to finish fighting before waging a war. The Black Feather Army soldiers covered the city wall like locusts. The flood of bronze attacked the Black Feather Army over and over again. Their numbers were dropping as well. Some of their swords had broken. They had resorted to using their fists. When their fists broke, they used their teeth. The sturdy armor had always been the best tactic that the flood of bronze had. But during this battle, some of the bronze armor had started to break. One part of the city wall had been broken through. The flood of bronze could not win against the strength of numbers from the opponent. The Black Feather Army climbed up the wall without fear. They held their padao in their hands and looked at the flood of bronze. Suddenly, the flood of bronze forcibly raised their power. Everyone knew that once they had done so, there was no turning back. But they had no choice. Brothers, we shall be comrades in the next life. I am very honored to have met all of you. Someone shouted with a smile. Then, he rushed towards the Black Feather Army like a moth to a flame. The flood of bronze used their lives to regain the part of the wall that had been infiltrated. Chen Xuan and the rest were surrounded by the 9 remaining rank 1 experts. Chen Xuan's helmet was broken, but he smiled widely. He used the long sword in his hand to attack his enemies. For a period of time, even 3 rank 1s could not deal with his attacks, but the flood of bronze knew that this was not a long-term plan. If no accident happened, they would eventually be exhausted. Suddenly, Chen Xuan laughed at Cheng Qiuqiao, who was on the city wall. Qiuqiao, if you see Brother Shu, tell him that I have not let him down. And I will definitely fix your car in the next life. His eyes were bloodshot. His strength continued to increase, and increase. Not only did this happen to Chen Xuan, even Chen Bailey, Li Yixiao, and Nailin K experienced the same thing. It was as if their blood was boiling. Blood vessels started to appear through their skin. I am Chen Xuan from the Heavenly Network. Who dares to challenge me? Chen Xuan looked at the rank 1 patron from the Black Feather Army. If Brother Shu was here, what would he say? Let me think, that's right. I'm not targeting anyone. I'm just saying, everyone here is garbage.
What does it mean to be happy? 'Cause it looks like we all don't know. Glass half full or empty, man, we just putting on a show. Try to look to the heavens.